Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today is January the 2nd, 2022. And in Chiluba, we would say Chidimu, Chilinga, which means Happy New Year. And, we always got to start off the new year right, uh, in a hoppy place, all puns intended for the rest of the show. We have three very special guests with us, and we will be talking about the upcoming weekend for coming up in Houston, Texas on January the 8th and the 9th. And the Hoppy film and the Hoppy film movement. And, two of the guests is no strangers to this channel. But our other guest, this is his first time on the platform, so we are honored to have him. And the guest I'm speaking of course, is Professor James Small, Sister Felicia Grant, and Felicia Bradford, and Brother Taki Grant of the Hoppy film. So this is the producers and cast members of the Hoppy documentary film. So we're going to talk more about that. And then, of course, the weekend and a whole bunch of other stuff. So thank you all for joining. Sit back, and we'll be back in just a second. Welcome back to the Mbongi. Again, this is January the 2nd, 2022, the first show of the year, and it is going to be a very, very powerful show. I thank each and every one of you who is joining us live, and of course, those of you who are joining the archives. And as always, I want to start off with a few announcements. Of course, the upcoming ACET tours, returning to the Source conference and tour, will be happening in February, starting February the 18th, all the way to the 28th. And it will also include a very powerful conference weekend, I believe the 25th and 26th. Brother Taki can correct me. And scheduled to be there is a very, very powerful array of scholars who will be presenting on a number of topics, and that includes our own Baba Professor James Small, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Anthony Browder, Dr. Solange Asprey, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, Dr. Wade Nobles, Mfudisi Jehuti Mess, Vera Nobles, the wife of Dr. Wade Nobles, and Theophila Bing. I'm missing someone, and they'll correct me when they get on. So, and of course, including myself. And so, to find out more about the tour, kind of last minute, but you can still make it, and just go to acettours.com to find out more. And this is the link. And of course, we are here to discuss the upcoming weekend in Houston, Texas, as the Hoppy movement is circulating around the country. The next stop is Houston, Texas, my hometown, and it's going to be a 2-day weekend. And that is going to be on this coming weekend, January the 8th and January the 9th, Saturday, January the 8th, and Sunday, January the 9th. And on the 8th, there will be a lecture from both Dr. Wade Nobles and Professor James Small. Dr. Wade Nobles, the title of his lecture is Sikh, or Sikh, if I'm saying that correctly, the restoration of cultural or of culture and consciousness. And Professor Small will be speaking on the restoration of African sacred sciences. This will be at the Shrine of the Black Madonna, located at 5309 Martin Luther King Boulevard, of course, in the 3rd Ward in Houston, Texas. And on the next day will be the film showing at the same location at the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And there will be followed, or it will be followed by a panel discussion where added to the conversation besides Professor Small and Dr. Wade Noble will be Dr. Vera Noble and our very own brother Taaqiy Grant, who is the producer of the film. And I will be there as well on the panel. So for more information, for those of you in Texas and especially Houston and the surrounding areas, make sure that you go to hoppyfilm.com and click on, just scroll down a little bit and click on Houston and purchase your tickets. This is a weekend, a series of events that you do not want to miss. And speaking of conferences and lectures, I guess I'll share my screen. In February as well, I will be part of, let me find, there we go, of this discussion, which will be an online conference, a 2-day conference. I think it's on Tuesday and Wednesday in February, the 15th and 16th. And the University of Amen LLC is putting this together in collaboration with the Department of Pan-African Studies and the PLO Foundation of Gambia, and I think as well the Sheikh Anta Diop University. And so the title of the conference is West Africa and Beyond, Ancient Nubian and Egyptian Interconnections. And so so far the scheduled presenters are going to be Dr. Abdul Salua, who's he did, how should I say this? He went to Temple University and he did his dissertation on the relationship between the Yoruba, he's a native Yoruba speaker, and ancient Egypt, and talks about their migration. So that was his PhD dissertation. Also a student of Dr. Teofilo Benga, who will be on the Hoppy Aket tour. And then there is Dr. Keita, biological anthropologist, Dr. Sharmarka Keita, of course, your brother asarimhotep over here, and Dr. Muhammadal, or Muhammad, or a variation of the word Muhammad, but Muhammadal Nasir Sar, professor at the Sheikh Anta Diop University, Dr. Ivis Victor Ngono, who's an Egyptologist out of Cameroon, our good brother Dr. Jahi Issa, and Dr. Salam Faraji. They're the ones who are putting on the conference. And then there's Dr. Oman Digi from the University of Yaoundé, also in Cameroon, Egyptologist and linguist, and the PhD candidate Anissa Malvoisin, if I'm saying that correctly. I do apologize if I murdered that name. But she is a PhD candidate in Egyptology and in the Nubian studies more narrowly. And so it's going to be a very powerful conference. So make sure y'all go to westafricaandbeyond.org to get more information and purchase your tickets there. And that is the extent of my announcements. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to the program, to the Mbongi, Sister Felicia, Brother Taki,
peace, Asar,
and Professor James Smalls. Peace and blessings to you all. How are you all doing?
Good. Peace and blessings to everyone. Happy White Man New Year. It is one of our ancient celebrations, but it wasn't New Year. It's the solar cycle. New Year is when you harvest things. You don't harvest things in the midwinter. So most African New Years fall in September through that first week or two of September, which is worldwide harvest time. Anyway, enjoy the next 12 months, whether it's the Gregorian or the Cometian calendar. And then maybe you can get Felicia to smile.
Indeed. Well, I've started I created a new calendar, an African-American calendar, where the new year starts in June. And the days of the week are labeled the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. So Sunday, starts Uchakalia, and it goes all the way down
to love Imani. To see that, because I got about 5 others, all of them say they can match in calendars. So I would love to see yours. We can compare these things because we do need one.
Yeah, it's just a way to keep the principles alive in people's minds throughout the year.
It's got to be deeper than that. We need a calendar. A calendar measures the events of the human spirit in the 12, whether we call them months or whatever cycle of the year. It anchors you someplace every day, every week, every month. So we do need it. And that concept you just laid out, I'd really love to look at.
That sounds really cool.
So I'll let the public know when all of that comes into fruition. But yes, thank each and every single one of y'all for coming on the program. And as mentioned earlier, the reason for the season, as some of the church folks would say, is the upcoming tour stop in Houston, Texas, for the Restoration of Consciousness weekend. And I want to start off with Brother Taki to discuss the nature of the film. So we're going to start off with the film first, and then we're going to go into the importance of the weekend itself. So tell us, for those who don't know, who's been under a rock and don't know about the Hoppy film, what is it about, and what are your so tell us about the film, and then of course tell us about the movement, the Hoppy movement, and then lead into the weekend coming up this January 8th and 9th in Houston, Texas.
First thing I want to say, thanks for having me on the show. And I like your openers.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes, I was going to say that.
You did a good job putting the openers together. Kudos to you, my brother.
Indeed.
Now, in terms of the Happy film and the Happy movement, I don't know if I can really actually separate the two, because from the onset of the film development, just the principles, everything that went into it, the film had to, for me, it had to be more than a film. It had to be a movement. I considered the first 2 films I did, like Nubia and the Tekken, were more so films. They were great works, but they were more so films. What separates those films from Happy is the elements in Happy, the discussion of the economics, politics, and culture, the movement centered around economic empowerment through economic literacy, and that's where you get this whole spirit of revival. And I got to tell you, this whole weekend, the naming and the title of it comes from Professor Smalls when he called Happy the Restoration of Consciousness. I had to take a step back and think about that for a minute. But that's what this movement is doing, is restoring something, is bringing it back a different level of consciousness to our people. So when I think of the HAPI movement and the film and just the film's production in regards to what we were doing, it was always thought of as the next step. In other words, what I mean by that is we were putting these different cast members and these different scenes together during the edit or post-production, but it was like, how does this impact someone after they watch the film? And that's what HAPI is. HAPI is essentially a journey through time. The film that we're talking about now, it starts now and it goes back to time and examining the economic and political structure of ancient Kemet, using it as a framework to then now say, who are we today and how can we regain our economic empowerment? Well, first, in order to do that, you have to become economically literate. And this is where the HAPI film comes in, because it gives people a foundation of economic literacy. And from that economic literacy foundation, we were able to get this movement going. The movement is more than just about economics. The movement is about really, checking for Black people in a real way. And I think that's something we need to do. Matter of fact, I think that's what we definitely need to do. That we need to get more involved with other Black people and align ourselves, not just the HAPI movement, but just everyone, loving Black people. So actually, the shirt here, we call it the HAPI Compass. And we use HAPI here as an acronym to describe certain things of the HAPI movement. Home, assets, politics. I think the last one is insurance. But one of the things that's important about that is we created or developed the HAPI Compass because we saw it in the film. It was moving, not only through time, but through geographical locations. And that's really kind of almost synonymous to what people go through in their life. So we use this compass as a measuring point, so you can actually take the film, take the compass, and find out where you are today. So those two things for me go hand in hand, the film and the movement.
I appreciate it. And Sister Felicia, I've renamed you Grant at the beginning of the conversation.
And actually, you called me Bradford one day, Harton the other day. Grant.
It's how I have it on my phone. So like on Facebook, your last name is different than what I have on my phone. So I'm just looking at it based off the phone. So I'm like, okay, let me put Bradford. But then I see here, I'm like, wait a minute, is that a middle name?
It's Felicia Harden. Felicia Harden.
Yeah, so I got to change my phone. See,
yes,
you was keeping Professor Small's email a secret, and now your true last name. So
you know what?
I just get no love in 2022.
You know what? And I'm gonna get you Professor for that too. Tell you.
No, I knew him when he was a very, very young man. When I first started coming out to Houston, when he was playing with his little camera. He doesn't remember me from those days.
I remember you.
I remember him from when I'd get calls from the study group, which I was advising. And I remember him from the Elders of the Craft. They had great hope for him back then. But no, he's an extraordinary young man who has grown in extraordinary boundaries over the last few decades. And I'm very proud of that and proud to be on this platform today.
I appreciate it.
To talk about the concept and the movement HAPI.
Indeed. I appreciate it. Sister Felicia,
yes.
Y'all been going around the country premiering the film, and how has the reception been from the people who are viewing it live, and what can we expect, in the future regarding the film? Is there going to be a part 2, to the film? Is that in the works? Is that conceived? Is Brother Taki secretly putting a film together that's going to be out soon? It comes out the same time as John Wick 4. Is that the timing?
Well, okay, so let me just dissect that. So, it's kind of like, I remember seeing this early on when Hoppy first came out, and people were like, "Oh, when's Hoppy Part 2?" And we're just like, "Damn, we just birthed this baby," And so right now, I would say the baby's not even walking yet. Okay. So before we can even think about another baby, this baby got to be able to clothe and feed themselves. Okay. And yeah, before we can even and walk, before we could even think about a Happy 2 right now. But let me just tell you first to start from the inside, like how do we feel when we're touring with this film? Seeing everybody in person is so, oh my God, it's like this energy that just keeps building upon building upon building upon every city that we go to. We kicked it off in Detroit at the Charles Wright Museum. It was a magnet. If anybody is in the Detroit area, you need to go by that museum. It's beautiful. But people are so happy to be able to get out. With this pandemic happening, it was so nice for people just to be able to see each other. Bump. Which however you wanted to do it, people are very happy to see each other. And just to let you know, just if you're in the Houston area and you're going to come out, is that we adhere by all COVID protocols in terms of masking and things like that. But the energy is just getting bigger and bigger with each city we go to. By the time we got to Washington, D.C., we had a line wrapped around the corner. And we were like, oh my God, like this is exactly the start of a movement. Okay, it's the start of a movement. And a lot of people are opening it, are open arms to us, and they're sharing the information, which is what we want them to do. If you've already seen Hoppy, and I see you got the crew in the comments, you got DM, you got everybody up in here. And so, Michelle Jewel, listen, it's because of these people right here who are literally looking at Hoppy and then telling someone else, check this out, go to happyfilm.com, do this, do that. And this is really what this movement is about. It's about just getting this information out. And so, the city tour has been it's been really good for us. It's been really good. Oh, you got Oma Wale? Wow, okay. This is like a Hoppy audience over here, Asar.
Brother Oma Wale Africa says the Philadelphia premiere was definitely the hottest.
I wonder why he would say that. Philly was hot though. Let me tell you, Philly was pretty fire. Yeah. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, because it was interesting because we had Dr. Jeffries and Jabari Ozazi and myself on the panel. But then like right in the middle, Dr. Rosin Jeffrey was like, oh no, I got to hit this microphone. She got up in all her grandeur. She walked up onto the stage and she said, excuse me. I mean, before anything, there was a chair. She was sitting down. So yes, Philly was definitely right. Like each city has been, very memorable, it's been very special in their own way. So yes.
I'm upset that I missed the Philly premiere, but and now to Professor Smalls. And so from what I hear, besides just being a cast member of the film, you had an integral part in the conceptualization. Am I right? I know there's a relationship that you and Brother Taki have, and some dialogue happen, and ultimately we get this film. So if you can you tell us about those formative stages, and then your role in the film itself, and the expectations that you would like for those who are watching the film to get? What should they be looking out for when watching this film?
Well, I always talk about African sacred science, and the key thing at the top of African sacred science is African honesty. Most of what you just said is Taaqiy's modesty. Much of this idea comes out of Taaqiy's head, a process that he was already involved in with the 2 videos before, Nubia, and what was the other one?
The Tekken.
The Tekken.
The Tekken.
And he was working with another young brother partner of mine named Brother Rock. And Taki would have this thing. I don't know why he chose to come to my house, maybe because I got a big house sitting up here in New Rochelle. And so 2 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning, he said, I'll be getting up from work, or midnight, he said, I'll be getting off at work from 1. Could I come by your house? And he would just show up at my house at 1:30 in the morning with these ideas, dealing with how to explain to our people how to become economically literate, how to become economically savvy. This was his journey, and he was just bringing me and others in who he thought, I guess, could loan to the journey of creating a concept that would evolve into a movement on how to become economically literate, economically fluent, economically sovereign, because without that, we stay in poverty, we stay in slavery, we stay as victims of others. And so to the degree to which I could loan to that concept is where I've added, I hope, something to the project and to the movement. I know for some reason he likes my voice. I started just out doing the voiceover stuff, you know. Okay, he's not even paying me. The voiceovers were good. And he would write stuff and bring it to the house ready to film. And I had 5 minutes to learn this little script and do the voiceovers. But conceptually, this is Taaqiy trying to find a way to bring African peoples, because what's happening economically to us here in America is the same thing going on in the Caribbean, Canada, the UK, and all of Africa. With all of those 54 governments, their economic sovereignty is no greater than ours. Not as great, actually. And that's sad. And until we understand the relationship between economics and survival, the relationship between economic and nation building, the relationship between economic and family building, economic and community building, economic and civilization building, we will not be able to move ahead. Because until we get that relationship, get an understanding, and by looking at Hoppy, looking at the place they call the Nile, for those who don't understand what Hoppy is, who might be watching, Hoppy is the river they call the Nile, the longest in the world, and it is located in Africa. By looking at its nature and its process, and what it allowed our people to produce as the leading civilization in the world ever, will give us an opportunity to examine how to use those concepts, principles, and ideas in today's world so that we can take control of the economic destiny of our lives. That's really what we're talking about. Otherwise, we remain impoverished and enslaved, no matter how much money you make. Last year, we made 1.7 trillion. The year before 1.4, and the year before 1.3 trillion. That's just the African American. And we gave it away to our enemies without a thought, while complaining of the exploitation of those enemies on our communities, on our minds. So hopefully HAPI will give us the conscious revitalization, restoration, that would allow us to see economic in a different light, as a different kind of tool that can be used in multiple ways to help liberate our people.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And I'm going to stay on you for a second. Can you tell us, in summary form, what you will be talking about? What do you mean in regards to your title for your talk that is coming on January the 8th, and the importance of of what you'll be talking about in this continuous type of HAPI type movement?
Well, this concept, African sacred science, I'm sure somebody used it before, but I presented it to my sister, Dr. Patricia Newton, ancestor, when she, Dr. Hunter, and myself was about to do a lecture series on spirituality. And I thought spirituality had been so misconstrued and had been so misrepresented in the dialogue that we need to have a label for what we're talking about that was more in tune to the reality of African peoples. And so I suggested to her that the conference not be called a conference on spirituality, but that it be called a conference on African sacred science. Africans presented science. European comes up with this foolish notion, as they always do, and we play with it, that they created the concept, the steps that we call science. Ridiculous. You can't mummify a body without knowing that concept. You can't make a calendar without repetition, repetition, repetition. Okay? And people were mummifying bodies in the Sahara, or before there was a Sahara, before there was a Kemet. So we got a deep thing we deal with, you know. And so I say there's a science of nature, the knowing of nature, the having studied nature, the having interpreted nature's repetitions that we call its laws, and the cycles, the repetitions of its cycles, and see what the results of all of that is, and how that interplays with the human being's role in that ecology, you know, because we're just another thing in nature. Bumblebees probably look at us and think of what an idiot we are and how disruptive we are, you know what I'm saying? And so our ancestors, when you study any of the sacred systems they've kept, the Yoruba system, it's not a religion. The ancients never called any of those things religion. They never called nothing in Kemet a religion. We're doing that. Big mistake. They don't call it in the Akan tradition a religion. They didn't call it in the ancient Congo tradition a religion, or any of the ancient Southern Africa religion out of the space out of which all of us have evolved. If we really want to look for the cradle, we got to go to Swaziland, you know, and better into Congo to see the beginning. But that's another long discussion. But out of that understanding of our ancestors, and especially looking at Kiplers, what are they doing? They're explaining to us what in Kemet, in the hieroglyphs, or the Medu Neter. They're explaining nature. Every symbol in the ecology that surrounds them is one of the ideograms or letters or characters in their alphabet. Okay, they're explaining nature to themselves, and they're using nature to explain nature to us. They're explaining the cosmology, and you can only explain the things they've explained, produce the temples they've produced, if you've been in this process at least, that the clock is to say 25,000 years. But that's only one repetition to talk about solar circumvention. So you really got to talk about 50,000 years, because who would do it once and trust that? If I see you do the same thing twice, I say, okay, now we're on to something right here. That's at least 50,000 years of observation, talking about science. So that's really kind of where I want to go with it, even with vibrations. You know, here we are, a long distance apart. Sisters in the Bronx, I'm in New Rochelle, Taki's in Queens, you're in Houston. But believe it or not, our vibrations still affect the cells and the molecules in one another's bodies just from having this conversation over this electronic medium. And we don't pay it any attention in reality. So what happens when we're in each other's face, trying to be friends, trying to be lovers, trying to be husbands and wife, trying to be brothers and sisters, trying to build political organization, and have no understanding about what true sacred relationship is, we're always going to fail. We're always going to fail. So we have to have some at least basic understanding of what the sacred science of the universe is that our ancestors left as a culture and a blueprint. They didn't build those buildings to show themselves off. They knew from study they had to fall. They knew it. Me and Dr. Clark talked about this 40 years ago. when my son Agnatin had just been birthed, because he's Agnatin's godfather. And I was asking him about these things, and Dr. Clark says they knew they were going to fall. So how do we leave enough evidence? How do we leave enough guide? How do we leave enough pathway that can't be destroyed, and our children will find their way back? So when we look at all of those things, all of those extraordinary scientific instruments, pyramids, temples, tombs, carvings, Medu Neter, and we talk about the Medu Neter, the aspect of it that is glyph, but we don't talk about the hieratic script and the demotic script. What level of consciousness one must be on to be able to do cursive, covering that broad spectrum of idioms. That's a deep. We've got the different books on the different medicine, on the different surgery that we are doing there. We know that the surgical book in Europe medicine and in general medicine in Europe was still being written in Arabic, which is just a copy of the Medu Neter scripts in the 1700s. So we're talking about a sacred science that others have broken up into little pieces and parcel out as specialty areas. But for Africans, we've got to bring it together. It's a science of the universe, a science of nature, the ecology, the science of its representative, the human being. We are the totality of nature in function and laws. And that's why we could do all the things we did in the past. But somebody have erased something. When you cut a person off one generation from a body of information, it's not useful to them. They don't have it. I just need to cut you off one generation from that body of knowledge. Yes, there's a lot of it in your subconscious, but it'll only be brought forward when familiarity that brings about memory produce that, and that means studying history. But you have to have access to that information. We now have access to a history that our great-great-parents didn't have. We can now bring the African back alive again because we have crossed the borders. And HAPI is doing such an extraordinary job of it. Taki, your concept was beautiful. How do you take this river that ran through the middle of this extraordinary civilization and then make it the tool for how people understand economic liberation in a time everyone is trying to crush the African economically? This gives us a chance to look at ourselves differently and without really violently injuring even our worst exploiter in our community. We could just walk past this store and nod good afternoon and keep our money in our pocket and spend it in the HAPI designated stores. It's that simple. In 2 months, they're out of business. They sell you their store cheap. You go on about your business. You need to own your community again. It's not complicated what we're talking about, and it's not a threat to anyone. It is the salvation to Black people, because if we don't take control of the economic trappings of our lives, we'll stay in this poverty, and our poverty is bringing the whole world down because we are that strong. Anything we are doing, the force of that Blackness is going to be the ultimate force, even if it's destructive.
Indeed. All righty. For those of you who are just joining us, we have some of the crew and producers of the award-winning documentary Hoppy. We have Sister Felicia, Brother Taaqiy, and Professor James Small, and we are discussing the film and the upcoming Hoppy weekend in Houston, Texas. Make sure you visit hoppy.com to find out more information. And Professor Small will be doing a lecture titled The Restoration of African Sacred Sciences. And Dr. Wade Nobles will also be present on Saturday, January the 8th. And his presentation is titled Sect, The Restoration of Culture and Consciousness. And even though he is not here, Dr. Wade Nobles has been on the program several times, so he is no stranger to the Mbongi. And so I want to ask Sister Felicia the importance of having, a living library and pioneer such as Dr. Wade Nobles, not only in the film, but to be able to have him as part of the conversation, the live conversation in Houston this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, excuse me. So I think anytime any of our elders are speaking anywhere, we need to be listening, because, I think that my library looks the same as probably your library, as Taaqiy's library. But a lot of those people are not here anymore. And, Dr. Nobles, being a psychologist, like a pioneering psychologist, with African mind and with African eyes, we can't have a conversation about economics without talking about the psychology piece. Like, we can't, the psychological rent, there's no way we can, even start to talk about that without, looking at the mind and just looking at how we not only view money, but view ourselves. And that's the beautiful thing, because in Hoppy, he's talking about this relationship between us and money. And so Dr. Wade, I mean, this is, coming out of a pandemic and being able to see Dr. Nobles talk, it's like, what? This is like a no-brainer, So yeah, listen, if you are in the Houston area, you guys need to come by, and just for that. I mean, listen, you guys need to see Hoppy too. But but definitely just being able to see both these brothers is it's gonna be life-changing.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are listening live, and of course, those of you who are catching the archives, I'm going to need y'all to... That is right. I'm going to need y'all to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if y'all have not already subscribed. We need to...
We about to take all of this, Asar.
He's showing off.
All of this. We about to take all of this. All of this. This is beautiful. Oh, I like that. Go ahead.
Yes. We want to be very disrespectful to the YouTube algorithms, so that, when we have these powerful guests, y'all will be the first ones to know. So make sure that you hit the like button so that, we can cut through the noise, and these shows will be recommended to the public. And so I'm going to move on now to Brother Taki, and I want you to give us some insight into the impact that Professor James Small has had on you, and how has, having him in the film, impacted you as well in the nature of the film. So, act like he's not here for a moment and just speak freely.
So, this whole concept of nation building and community is real with our elders, and it's a beautiful thing. And I have to go back maybe about 20 years ago when I first met Professor Small, and that came by way of Dr. Jeffries. And Dr. J was very deliberate on bringing me into this community. We used to have these events at the Clark House, with beautiful events. It was very family oriented. I was, just on the side, and you're around all this greatness. So really the impact, at the ASCAT conferences where I met Dr. Nobles, Dr. Asa Hilliard, so many others, and we would just be in this environment. And again, Dr. J was so, deliberate in doing that. We get to meeting people like Infudishi that came again, but that energy or surrounding that was there. And also now, Professor Smalls, like I said, about 20 years ago. So all these people, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries and many others who were around at that time, I feel like I have a part of all of them in me, because they were all kind of pouring into me during the time. So people say, yeah, well, HAPI, it may have been something I conceptualized, but this journey has been a consistent journey, one step at a time, being around greatness, So it's so important to understand the development of people through the community and the people that are around them. I am a product of my environment. You take me out of this environment, do something else, I may be a different person. Part of development also goes back further with Dr. Baba Watusi Branch, so who is an ancestor now, and the whole African Poetry Theater experience. So all these different elements are coming together for me to be who I am and do what I need to do. Professor Smalls is especially dear person to me because he always avails himself to any questions, any conversation. So that relationship there cannot go without being stated. And that's really how the film was made. The film was based on relationships. We also got to even mention the relationship with Tahuti Films, Robbie Gay. Everything was built around relationships. And these relationships predate the film by almost 2 decades. You know what I'm saying? So it didn't start in 2019, 2020, when the film came out. It really started 2 decades ago. And it was just leading up to the crescendo of HAPI. But this crescendo of HAPI comes through sitting next to people and talking to them, and them being very deliberate about who they are, what their job and what their mission is. And they are really just passing the torch, giving it to the next person, just instilling in me and other youngsters things that they have and their experiences. Sometimes, just not even conversations about historical conversations, but the conversations sometimes were just about life experiences. What I went through in the Navy, what I went through in football, what we did in South Carolina, all these different things, relationship with Malcolm X, all these different things is things that Professor Smalls and I have talked about throughout the years, and many, many more. That's just a little brief snippet, but it's not just Professor Smalls. Again, it's Dr. J and Felicia. We can go down the list of people, but it all comes from Africans being Africans. And so for me, HAPI is the result of that. And not only in this conceptualization of the historical aspect, but also just the HAPI movement, just us getting with other Black people and working with each other in a very holistic way, in a very meaningful way. That is HAPI. But that comes from what I've been, taught and people I've been around.
Indeed. And I'm glad you brought that up in terms of the relationship, because that was ultimately where I was going with the questioning, in terms of how these particular interactions, how you may not see in the future, what that may bring, why it's important to have good human relations, because you don't know what you can build together, when in the future. Like I tell young folks in high school, like, be kind and be good to the folks here. These folks may hire you or help your business or whatever it is. It's like these relationships you establish here can blossom into other things. And so some 20 odd years ago, when I transferred and went to the University of Houston, it's a series of interconnections and relationships that lead me here, even to this date. And so I remember sitting in a lecture with Dr. Asa Hilliard, and he introduces me to the book African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo when it just came out. And when I read it, I went and got it and ordered it after he mentioned it. And from that interaction, started this 20 plus year journey into relationship between ancient Egypt and Bantu Congo cultures and the like. And of course, you know, many folks have known my journey. I've said this several times before, but you know, prior to me going into college, and even, you know, like my freshman and sophomore year, still, I was a Hebrew Israelite, you know, in the Israeli School of Universal Practical Knowledge. So, you know, after, of course, I came to my senses, my African senses, as I say. uh, you're introduced to a certain um, pantheon of scholars, I should say. And so, you know, this is when I was introduced to the Anthony Browders, the Naeem Akbars, the Dr. Benz, the Dr. Clarks, and the like. And when I was at Texas State University, what was then Texas State, now it's excuse me, it was Southwest Texas State, then it's now Texas State. They didn't have an Africana or African American Studies program. And so we had to do self-study, and organizations were created. And of course, when you have an organization on campus, you can bring in speakers. So they would bring in Brother Anthony Browder and others. And so that was our Africana Studies, you know, at the time. And then when I, excuse me, transferred to the University of Houston, they had an African American Studies program. And at the time, it was run by Dr. Jelani, who a year later passed. When I got to the campus in 2000, and I'm talking about Dr. Jelani Williams, when I got there in 2000, I started an organization called Umoja. And, you know, you needed a kind of a faculty advisor for each organization that, you know, was started there. You had to have a faculty advisor. And so I asked Dr. Williams, and he agreed. And, you know, he kind of guided us, you know, and introduced us, you know, to a lot of people and a lot of things in the community of Houston. And so one of those things was the Taaqiy African Historical Society. And they would, you know, host these study groups, and they would also bring in lecturers all the time to Houston. And so, of course, one of those lecturers was Professor Smalls. And so I think the first time that I met him was at the Shrine of the Black Madonna, which we will be in on January the 8th and January the 9th, which isn't too far from U of H. In the third ward. And I don't know if they changed the name, because, you know, regentrification, all that is happening in that area, but it's still the third ward for folks like me. And so he was talking about African secret societies, and through the organization, I had an opportunity to interview him. And, you know, there was an old school interview with the tape recorder. So I had to, you know, tape the interview. He was at his hotel right before he was leaving. And I had to type out, you know, the whole interview. Matter of fact, I still have it in there, so I can print it out and give it to you when we arrive on next weekend. But it's interesting, you know, just how, you know, the cycle is, you know, saying some years later, and you know, I'll be sharing a panel. I'm in a film, you know, with you know, Professor Smalls, who's been, you know, very impactful in terms of the direction and how I look at Africa and even spirituality. And even to this date, you know, with my own independent research, I always say this, you know, publicly. I mean, like, Professor Smalls is the only one, in my opinion, who has African spirituality correct. And in terms of his definition of, you know, like, spirituality is reality. And I can demonstrate this in a very systematic way, looking at the languages and the cultures and in terms of the ideas of what they meant by what we're calling spirituality. And when I reflect on, and not saying that everyone else is wrong, but that in terms of the fundamentals of what it is, to me, the only person who has really captured that has been Professor Smalls. So it is really an honor again to have him on the program, to have him back in the city of Houston this coming weekend, and to just be a part of this conversation. Hopefully continuing in that process of enlightening minds and inspiring them to look within and to do greater things with the information. So I come from back in the day when they had the lectures on the DVDs and the CDs, the audios, and even before then the VHS tapes that used to circulate from the old lectures when Professor Smalls had locks back in the day. And so and as he mentioned, he talks about my camera. I've been to his house. I interviewed him for a documentary that I never finished. It was called Poetries and Grassroots. And I still have the tape. It's on one of those little mini tapes. It's still in Philly. And so one day I may just release it, just to show the interview. But yeah, so we go back, in some days. But even the extended, from the Taaqiy African Historical Society, in the relationship with Dr. Benz and the information coming from that. And so it is, and I'm saying all this to say that it is a treat, and you don't really understand, and until you're able to really kind of sit and listen to people live, that energy, that vibration that he's talking about in terms of being there in person and hearing and feeling the sense of and being inspired by the words into action. So I'm more on a scholarly route, and it's he's one of many individuals who have kept me on the path, even without like necessarily direct everyday teachings, because of course he's in New York and I was in Texas. But just his presence in the lectures have stayed with me, even throughout all these years. And so I do encourage everyone to come, and who knows what impact he may have on your life. And I would love to see that coming down the line. And even Dr. Wade Nobles, he's another just great giant, and wish we could have had him on as well, but we'll definitely have him back on the program. So as we're going into the final 10 to 15 minutes, I want to ask, what do you see in the near future? I'm talking to Professor Small. This going, like, what is your vision for African people in the information that we're sharing in this day and time?
Right. I think HAPI as an instrument, a tool, the movie, must cross the boundaries and go into Africa. And that should happen in 22. As Erbo, we'll see it happening in Kemet. But Kemet is not in the hands of the African right now. It's in the hands of the alien. So we've got to get, though many of our people still live there. That's why you need to call my daughter. Taki.
You my Isra?
We'll get to that later.
No, Isra and I, we spoke.
Okay. We'll talk.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to take care of business.
But coming back, 3 days ago, I was on African Daily TV with Sister Susan Tata and with the Queen of Gabon, one of the queens of Gabon, and with the King of the Omo people. Now, a lot of people don't know who the Omo people are, but that's the largest ethnic nation in the Southern African region. But their genesis is Congo, and they moved south. And you sound so much like them, Asar, when I listen to things you say, talking to the king and his concepts of reality and spirituality and where we have to go. And it always echoes in my head, two of my greatest teachers, Dr. Asa Hilliard and Baba Ishenge, both died within a year of one another or less, and both told me the same thing in our last visits. If we don't bring African culture back to the forefront and win the culture war, the economic and political wars, victory will not matter. And so, though HAPI is about economics in terms of trying to show us how to reassert, reestablish, and even reinvent the African economic thrust forward, it must ride on the cultural vehicle, which contains your spiritual or sacred science essence. And if we can keep that clear, you see, because we didn't just start doing things. You know, when you read on the Bantu Congo.
Oh, Fukiao?
Fukiao.
Yes.
It blows your mind after the first chapter. I mean, oh my God, real is so real. And what HAPI has done is brought together a group of scholars that has made real, real. It's not difficult to understand. And most of these scholars are complicated people, but somehow in HAPI, they've managed to present themselves in a very soft way. Like Malcolm said, make it plain, in a plain way. And I know the editors had a lot to do with this, and Taki had a lot to do with the final product on what's going to be presented to the world that came out of all of us and Sister Felicia. So the important thing is, how can we use the tool to bring the people back? You're not going to be a white man if you're Black and be free. A Black man will never be free. A Black woman will never be free being a white man or an Asian man or woman. Okay. You will be an Asian man or woman, and that means you will be a slave. I don't care how much money you got, how much privilege to fly about, how many houses you can run to. You're just a slave in somebody else's identity. And until the restoration, another thing Asa Hilliard said, that true freedom is to be shackled to your identity. So true freedom is to be shackled to your identity. Economics is the foundation that allows you to do that shackling. See, the cultural process is the shackling, and the spiritual and sacred science process is the shackling. But it must have a way to support itself, and that's where the economic foundation comes in, because it tells you how to use the wealth in your environment, whether that environment is a village in Africa, whether that environment is a ghetto in New York. If you learn to use the wealth in that environment, it won't be a ghetto for very long. But if you stay in that environment and see it only as a ghetto, other people come in and that ghetto is a wealth for them. It's freedom for them. They can go and build their identity and shackle themselves to it and raise their children. We have to see that. And that's what HAPI have to be clear on. Dr. Hilliard again said, all content must clearly have intent. All content must clearly have intent. So when we talk about the future of HAPI, we need to get sharper on what is the intent of HAPI. What is our purpose? What we're trying to do here with this. And I think we're on that path. We just have to make clear that we're on that path. Make clear what the intent is, because this is about freedom. This is about Pan-Africanism. This is about liberation. But we're coming from it in a way that doesn't frighten our people away, hopefully, because many of the other pathways we've used have frightened and already frightened our people. And so all of us have backgrounds in different spiritual systems Abrahamic system. I was an imam. I'm a Hajj. You know, Taaqiy comes from an Islamic and an even another little higher stage. Yeah, I know all about you. I do the 411 and the 511, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I used to lecture in Hebrew temples going back 40 years ago. I was their favorite non-Hebrew lecturer. Many of my friends and comrades were Hebrew Israelites in this community to this moment. And because I studied theology all of my life, because it was a pathway to trying to understand why we didn't have a theology. You know, Dr. Ben wrote a whole book on it, a black struggle without a black theology, you know. And we really need to understand, what does that mean? Our theology is our culture. Okay? It's our culture. And our culture is our way of being in reality. And all of the tools and the ideas and concepts and principles come from just getting up in the morning, washing your face, fixing a meal, referring to your mate, dealing with your children, making sure there's food, clothing, shelter, safety for that environment, and what goes out from there. That's all we're talking about. It's not difficult, but it has been made difficult. But we have to make it plain. And I think HAPI brings the message plainly. And that I hope we don't become guilty of being what I call ego, arrogance, exclusivity. Because there's many others trying to do what we are trying to do. And many boats on the River Nile on HAPI. All of them may not be carrying the produce that we are carrying, but all of them may have some produce that we may want to exchange something for. You know what I'm saying? Once we are clear on our intent. And I think the intent is to educate as many of our people across the world that economic is the foundation of a civilization. You can't build one unless you can develop an economic foundation under concepts, ideas, and principles that create families, neighborhoods, communities, and then civilization.
Indeed. It reminds me, going back to what you said a little earlier, in terms of, you know, culture being the vehicle. And I've always said that, you know, oftentimes we put the economic cart in front of the cultural horse. And like, I was thinking just one time, like, I was looking at some Dogon doors.
Oh my God.
Right? Like, and you'll see like the carvings on the door of, you know, whatever it represents in the culture, you know, in terms of sacred science. But I'm like, what if we had artisans who were in connection with, you know, Black architects who were designing homes for, you know, African people, who, like, that would be like part of our cultural thing. Like, we have these designs with our own signs and symbols, you know, on the door, so that when, you know, like, it could be a saying or a greeting or whatever blessing, you know, but the culture itself provides a vehicle for the artistry, that it is something practical, because all houses is going to need doors.
Right.
And that you can do, like, this can be an example, like something as very basic as that.
But that's exactly, that's exactly what we failed to do and what we've got to do. Because a brother called me, a Ghanaian king called me 2 days ago. He had gone to a Kwanzaa program. And he called me so I would call my brother in Ghana to criticize him positively. That if you want the African community to join Kwanzaa, because they celebrate Kwanzaa all over Africa, but if you want them to really celebrate Kwanzaa, you got to give them a role in Kwanzaa, meaning it can't belong just to the performers on the stage or the MC. You see, everybody in the audience have to be a participant. So how do you do that? So somebody's got to write some Kwanzaa songs. Somebody got to create some Kwanzaa dances. Somebody got to create some Kwanzaa wardrobe. Somebody got to create some Kwanzaa painting motif. Like you says, if you walk into the Kwanzaa house, the door should tell you where you're going before you get to open it. Like I have a couple of the granary doors of the Dogon. I know what's in that particular granary from what the man is working with at the door. So that Kwanzaa, I mean, culture is a set of ideas.
No.
And what we have to do is make those set of ideas visual, functional in the environment we're in. We call the visual functional the culture, but those are the tools of culture, the creation of culture, the gifts of culture. Culture is those ideas, principles, and concepts that tell you how to design that door, how to imagine that door, how to create that dance. You know, so it is the vehicle, and that's why they've taken it away. That's why everything about our culture has been made evil. Everything about our spiritual system is witchcraft, et cetera, et cetera. Because if they get that right, we're in trouble.
Indeed.
We've got wealth. We've got enough billionaires in Africa right now that we don't have to allow any European or Asian to come in and finance anything. But they don't have the African cultural, spiritual consciousness that would allow them to take all that money out of the American and British banks and go home and invest it in a mine in Congo, invest it in a mine in Zimbabwe, invest it in a bridge, invest it in a hospital. We've got billionaires on billionaires. Even here in America, Oprah wasn't the first Black billionaire. She's not the only one. I mean, Kanye may be wealthier than Oprah. You know, I think Kanye is the wealthiest Black businessman in America. But what is he doing with that wealth? Buying big houses and playing games. You know, he may be doing something. I'm not going to blame him. I'm proud of the young man. He's a brilliant young man to do that in the midst of America. But lacking a consciousness that is attached to an identity that is owned by a people, that's undergirded by a vehicle called culture, with the foundation of that vehicle being their economic reality, that we could do whatever we want to do in the world. No one could block anything. Everyone would have to be our friends. Their weapons won't matter. The only way their weapons matter because we don't have an option. We don't have a cultural option. You know, we don't have an economical option. And that's where HAPI comes in. HAPI is actually the people I talk to never thought of it like that. Didn't think of it in that simplicity that HAPI is presenting it. When we talk about economic politics and culture, you got to own land, labor, and resources where you live. You got to control economic politics and culture where you live. And the motivation got to be to provide food, clothing, shelter, safety for yourself and your family. That's what HAPI is talking about. Everything else is the frills that we must put around it so we can understand it.
Indeed. Like one way I look at it as well is that I always ask, because I get into these discussions all the time in terms of culture and whether African Americans have their own. And, you know, I'm kind of mixed on that. But I always ask the question, you know, what is the ideal human being that your culture is expected to produce? And once you get to the point where you can articulate what the ideal human being is, automatically you should be thinking about what institutions and what systems must be in place so that that human being is realized and it can reduplicate itself in terms of the society.
Precisely.
And I think that's, you know, exactly what Professor Smalls is saying. So why the food, clothing, and shelter? Because of course can't do anything without satisfying those basic needs, and then from there they can, you know, grow and expand into other areas. But this is why I think I have my tentative title for the Aket Tour lecture being Language or Historical Linguistics, a tool for ancestral memory recovery and an instrument of warfare in terms of language. And so this is why these African concepts and using these African terms is not simply just, you know, us going back and taking and feeling good and getting African names. My argument is that it should be used as instruments of warfare, so that, you know, your concepts and ideas is the checks and balances against, you know, the foreign ideologies that may, you know, try to creep in and reorient, you know, your movement. And so you have some things back. So when we say, you know, a ma'at, is that action within the Ma'atic framework, if we're using, the Egyptian, or what is the expectation in terms of Iwa Pele in the Yoruba tradition, that in terms of the expectations, what are our expectations towards each other, so that the other ideologies cannot be used against us. We already have the framework, we already have the language, to fight back.
We're missing the language. We're missing the language. We have a lot of the other things over the years. We fought well. We've been victorious on many fronts. Very few people in the world have fought the battle of the African American and have won the victories. We've won against one of the mightiest forces on the planet Earth. If you can't fantasize about who this demon is, they have arrayed the mightiest force on the planet Earth in the last couple of 100 years. We have kept them at bay and been at war with them for over 400, going into 500 years, and have won some enormous victory within their own institutions. But we have to be clear on establishing what is ours. And one of the things I find throughout, from Kemet to forward, we are trying. God is only as great as the mind that created it. We put that out there first. I can explain that years later. But God is only as great as the mind that creates it. And so the mind of the human can't create into anything greater than itself. Okay. It can only create greater as itself. And so our culture have always been to be that image that you have designed for divine. And that's what the culture is about. It never changes. And you can study all of them, and the language speaks to that. And when you go to, when the language is missing, because we don't have a sustained African language system that is universal to us. The biggest one we got is the Swahili, the Kiswahili. More people in Africa speak than any other. In the Western Hemisphere, we have the multiple creoles that people have created to survive and sustain and maintain. In African America, we have the largest Creole in the Western Hemisphere, but no one will respect it, and we don't even realize it. And so we can't use it in the way it could be used towards our mental liberation. So you who vested yourself deeply, as I could see, into linguistics, going to have to be the one that pushed that forward, and the rest of us help you do it, because the language carries everything. It carries everything in it. It's the mind. It carries everything.
Right.
Indeed. Well,
peace and blessings, everyone. I'm just sorry. So I got to get ready to run. Get ready for this Happy Talks interview with Dr. Milana Karenga.
I understand. I was just getting ready to end.
Give Doc my regards.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Will do. All right, people. I'll see you around. Peace.
Peace. Yeah, I was just getting ready to wrap up now, because I know there's other interviews and things to be had. But go ahead, Sister Felicia.
Everyone else got to tell their personal story about Professor Small. I want to tell my personal story about Professor Small.
Really?
So listen, when I got involved with Hoppy, and I remember going over to I think back now, because I feel like I've had such a birth and growing up, just being introduced to Hoppy. And one of the things I have to just thank is my altar. Every time I look at it, I think about Professor Small, because he was the first time, like my family we're from Detroit, but by way of South Carolina, right? And I remember Professor was talking about how there was a lot of things that we did, but we didn't know why we were doing it. It was just part of how, we grew up with different things, like salt in the corner, just all these different type of traditions. And so now when I look back, my family, we've always had altars, but not quite, like no one knew it was called an altar. Like my mother is 70, right? And I last year I was telling her, I was like, Mom, you do realize this is an altar. And, because she does the same things that Professor Small does at his altar. And it's just, and so, I think about, if there's like one thing, well, I hope no one just has a gun to my head and says, what's one thing you like about Professor Small? But one thing I will say is that the introduction to the altar, has been mind-blowing, and the introduction to looking at yourself in the mirror. Yeah, I think when you guys are thinking about how we support elders and looking at their bodies of work, there would be no one around Professor Small when it starts talking about how we look at ourselves. There's no one that can even touch that. So, I just want to say thank you for that, Professor, because it's just a different way. And I know that is really powerful, because even like people who don't watch the show all the time, like my brother, every time you're around, he's like glued. And, and we always talk about this concept about being able to look at ourselves and that we're pieces of God. So this is, yes, I just want to say thank you publicly, because I don't think I ever said thank you publicly.
Wow. I didn't know I had to be thanked.
You do. Why? Because let me tell you, because I don't want to be on no little memorial service talking about, oh, Professor Small. No, I'm giving you your flowers. Taki calls it heartbeat props right now. It's really important that you understand that, like, your life that you've lived, it's really grown a lot of us. Okay. And that is why we are, where we are, because of your teachings. Asar just gave out a beautiful map of how he even got here by something, from being introduced to you. So I just want you to know that. Okay. It's really important that you know that.
Well, Asar told me things that I didn't remember. Picking up in my mind, recalling these spaces. But look at me.
The work.
I paint Dr. Clark's bathroom. I put the ceiling up his in his hallway. We got to walk him to where he was going when he got blind and couldn't see, so he would have to tell he master crossing the streets. To be with Dr. Ben every day, to go to his house and argue with him, and sit there with him and Sister Gert, to be with Leonard Jeffries for 55 years, almost 56 years. Me and Dr. J have run together all across the world, the Caribbean, the Africa, the United States, and Sister J right beside us, looking at us like we crazy. The gift of a Jake Carruthers, of a Maulana Karanga, of an Asa Hilliard. I have all of those pieces making me up. Baba Fukiai, to be on the panel with Baba Fukiai multiple times in multiple places. Dr. Francis Welsing, who I've known since I was, I guess, in my mid-20s. Dr. Patricia Newton, interacting with all those forces, Tony Browder, to do Theophilo Banga, to be in his classes, to be his friend, to have him walk you through a museum, just you and him, showing you what to look for. And I can pick up a phone and call him in Congo Brazzaville any day of the week I want to. All of those powerful universal energy clusters, which we call ancients, elders, or ancestors, because that's what we're talking about, that I've had access to them. So, like I told you the last time, I know whether it was useless, Saba, I was on your show when I was telling people, as I went through this thing with my knee and being down for 3 months, that's the longest I've been away from the public in almost 60 years. It was odd to me. And so I started saying, well, I'm going to start charging people. I'm doing all the speaking. I'm staying in. I'm not ever making any money. And the very next night, a spirit came. She was a Black woman, just as black as a shirt, and sat on my bed and said, we did not give you the fruits for yourself. We gave you the fruits to give to the children. Okay, I'm back. I got it. All right, I'm cool. They've always taken care of me. But I've always been, because I know I've seen the other side. There is no other side. That's the truth about the other side is. But I've seen those energies we call ghosts. I've seen those energies we call spirits. I've talked to those energies. In the years early, afraid and confused and don't understand and can't grasp. Then after a while, you realize something spoke to me, even though I didn't see a visual. And then there are occasions when you get visuals. And then there are times when you get dream visits. And then you have Just mature and learn to recognize that nothing that comes through you is from you. Nothing that comes through you is from you. You prepared yourself to be chosen, and they chose you. And that's your blessing, you know. And you just do what you got to do until your thing is done.
Indeed. And it's interesting because I remember reading in one of Foucault's work that even the so-called spirit world is just really the accumulation, at least in the Bantu Congo context, is really just the accumulation of ancestral wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really just kind of a dark space.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I know the, you know, like having another life in a kingdom in another space is soothing, but in to some respects, even if you know the thought that there might not be something else beyond, and at least in a familiar way that we would think of it, really should, in my perspective, uh encourage and motivate us to do the best and the most that we can with the life that we have, and to share, like one of the definitions, as I've mentioned many times before, um you know, I've renamed, you know, after Foucault, or at least inspired by Foucault, the, you know, what we call African spirituality, I call Kimoyo. And, you know, looking at the linguistics of it all, and then, you know, and juxtaposing it to the various wisdom traditions in which I've been able to study, part of that definition is the healing power of giving and the healing art of open-hearted sharing. And uh the even the concept of mod, well, mod is kind of several homonyms, but there's one word, mod, or ma, which means to give, to offer, or whatnot. And but what I've come to realize is that really it should be defined something along the lines of open-hearted sharing. And it is from these human reactions in sharing food that inspires other types of rituals with spirit and the altars and all this other kind of stuff. But it comes from just sitting down and sharing food with one another, and having a conversation, and building. I'm sorry,
Think
go
of
ahead.
that now. Think of that. What is it that we're really doing? If nothing existed but God, but the divine, but the totality of all creation, which we can't even conceptually come up with a notion of what a beginning is, because it can't be any such thing. That's our foolish limitation. But all that exists is it. Then what are we but an aspect of it, having created branches and branches and branches and branches and branches of itself, but it is still the same one thing, never to stop being that one thing. And in each of the branches, we are simulating an aspect of the thing that becomes like you were just expressing giving. Giving is an aspect of the divine, of divinity itself. But and when you do it, you're rebirthing that aspect of divinity. We can't. Nothing exists but the divinity. And it was a king that told me this in the western region of Essecato, when I brought a group of people, and another group, I think Omar Johnson's group, had come to his kingdom. And people were not acting quite like this. You know how we get American. And we seen this king, and he's got on this little beat up slippers, and he's got on a piece of jeans, right? He's got on some jeans, and he's got on a white old kind of beat up buba dashiki. So they didn't see the king. They didn't understand. True royalty don't dress in all that glitter and foolishness. Has nothing to do with kingship or queenship. And then he told me, he whispered to me and says, I want you to take over the perform. It was a wedding being performed. And he whispered and asked me to perform the wedding, which I've done weddings in the tradition before. But he said, inform the people that when I'm down there with you and be talking and maybe having a beer or something, I'm one person. But when I sit on this stool, I'm the ancestors. I transfigurate, I transform, I am them. And that's all any of us are when we reclaim our royalty. We are that thread of ancestry we call a family tree. If you take it back, it will stop at the feet of the divine. Okay. And all of us will meet in the same place as the one. So as we branch out, consciousness is about the remembering of the relationship to the one. So what aspect of the one that helps create its totality are you going to be proficient in? Loving, giving, sharing, helping. All of them are the qualities of God. We just use English. So he's confused us with anthropomorphic symbolisms of concepts, ideas, and principles, and we are chasing supposed historical anthropomorphic white men and women as being the deities. But I know that I am from the dot. And in the dot, you and me and Felicia was all a part of the one thing. And as we've been given personality, then our job is to make sure that that oneness out of which we evolve does not lose its adhesiveness.
It's interesting that you mentioned that when he sits in that seat. When I wrote the book Nesubiti, King in Ancient Egyptian, it was published in 2016. I made the argument that thrones are really shrines.
Absolutely.
And when the king sits, the king is really what they would call in many of the languages a living ancestor. And he represents the founding lineage, the founding, ancestor that started that particular lineage.
Absolutely.
So when you see a seat, is not a regular seat. It's not a throne. It's just not him sitting there. It's just exactly as what you said that the king said, is that he becomes the embodiment, and so of the ancestors that went before him in sitting in that particular seat. So it's these kind of things that are missing from the conversations when we're talking about these, because even though the king is for the the larger village or community or state, it's this, those are expansions of the home itself. So usually it's the of course the man is head of household. He's the chief priest of his home. But when he dies, his son takes over and fulfills those duties to the ancestors, in that lineage. And it's these kinds of things that need to be understood in the sense of family, and how that spreads out into these communal and kingship terms. It's not a coincidence that the word for kings is a word for father in many of these particular languages, because it comes from a household concept and family first, and then expands as the compound becomes a village and becomes saying a nation.
You don't lose that note on the king as the word for father.
Yeah.
In the Archon tradition, Nana is the word for God. Nana is the word for ancestor. Nana is the word for elder. Nana is the word for mother or father. Anyhow, that same one word. The only thing that changes is the tonal expression of the word. And then through that tonalization, you determine which one you're referencing.
Indeed.
So you really on it. I got to read your book, son. I didn't know you were acting like that. And I really would like to introduce you to the King of Omo if you haven't met him.
No, I have not.
I met him for the first time. We had been trying to meet And I heard about him, and I know that the ethnic kingdom he represents is the largest in South Africa. So there are multiple tribes, but he has pulled them together over the years. He was in the ANC, but after Nelson, he went back. He got elected to be the king, and the genesis of the Omo is the Congo. Very interesting man. So I'll make sure that I do that.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And I just got a text from Sister Felicia saying that she has to go. She has a date, and I'm keeping her from her future husband. And no, she didn't say all that, but I have gone over time. So although
I have a date.
I have
a date with StreamYard.
I don't want to.
Am I on that date too?
Dr. Malanga Karenga's on his date. And Taki is on his date.
Yeah. I'm free after this one.
Okay.
So I missed something earlier today.
No, you guys are going to be on. Are you guys going to be on Conscious Mindset like in 2 hours, right? Yes.
Is it 2 hours?
Oh, it's at 9:20.
9:20. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's Central Time or Eastern?
Day.
That's Eastern Time or
Eastern Time.
Okay.
I'll check what said, but I think so. I guess we're about to see it. I should text him and find out.
Send me the link.
Indeed.
At the time.
I did send the link.
Oh, that was the earlier one. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. See?
Well, it has been a true honor always to have you on, Sister Felicia and Brother Taaqiy to discuss this important movement. And of course, a big honor to have Baba Small here on the program. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you who are listening and joining the program and all your feedback that you're giving in the comment section. And so, of course, everyone loves Professor Smalls and dropping jewels and insight. And so they're excited. And I hope y'all are excited and will drive to Houston. Those of you in Dallas, those of you in Austin, those of you in San Antonio, to Houston, Texas for the Hoppy City Tour. And Dr. Wade Nobles and Professor Small will be doing a lecture on Saturday, January the 8th at the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And on that Sunday, the film will be shown and there will be a panel discussion afterwards. And so the panel will consist of Professor Small, Dr. Wade Noble, Dr. Vera Noble, Brother Taki, who we just saw earlier, and of course myself. So this is going to be a very powerful weekend. And thank each and every one of you for coming on the panel and sharing your wisdom and insights. And of course, y'all are always invited, on the program, and maybe not on such a busy day. So we can, continue these conversations, but thank each and every one of you. And make sure that y'all go to hoppyfilm.com. The link is right there, and it's also in the description to purchase the ticket and just to check out and get updates. And is there a feature that they can get on the mailing list?
Yes, if they go to website. Yep, you can do everything at happyfilm.com. You just hit at the top, it says get connected, and then you hit that button, put in your email address, and then you'll get our you'll get on our mailing list. We have a newsletter that comes out every month. It's chock full of really good articles that we've been able to maintain for since we started everything once COVID started. We started making a digital footprint since then. So yes, please sign up for the newsletter. That's how you stay connected to everything, right there.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, you have 2 minutes.
Yes.
Final words. and so I'll start with you, Sister Felicia, and then Baba Small.
Well, I just want to just first say thank you, Asar, for even having us on here. And I hope that everyone feels the same. Well, they don't have to feel the same way that I felt when I watched Hoppy for the first time. But I hope that just generally speaking, that they start to get inspired, but not just stay in an inspired state, but actually move to action. Because it's not about us talking about it continuously, but it's about us doing things to connect our economics, politics, and culture. It's literally about the doing. And so we gotta do stuff. We have plenty of information out there to help us to start doing. Just sitting and listening to you guys, y'all need to do like a little weekly little show. I'm telling you, yeah, it's been very, very informative. But just thank you, Asar, and nice seeing you again, Professor.
Same here, sister.
Indeed, respect,
guys. And Houston, come out, and peace to the chat.
All right, indeed. All right.
Peace and
blessings.
And I'm just honored, Asar, to be on the platform. It's fantastic. Your knowledge base is extraordinary, and where you planted yourself, good place.
I appreciate it.
We have an obligation in a short space of time as this energy cluster that we call ourselves to move our people from here to there. And you're quite well placed to do that. And the show, I'm watching how you use the technology so well. You can get some of that done. So thank you. And I
appreciate it. Indeed. Thank you, Professor, as well.
So I'll be seeing you later.
Basically, so in an hour or so.
Yes.
All righty.
Yes, sir. Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings. Thank you for joining. And again, thank each and every one of you for coming on the program and checking out everything that we got to say. Make sure that you like and share like the video and share the video, with friends and colleagues. And so I appreciate each and every one of you. And so I will end, I guess, with the video commercial for the film that I'm doing. We're talking about Hoppy film, but there's going to be an upcoming film called Chiena Into, and we're going to be talking about the relationship between the Congo and in South Africa and ancient Kemet. And it's going to be a very, very powerful film. So with that said, peace and blessings. And thank all of you who have donated tonight via Cash App. It is very much appreciated. And until next week, see y'all later. Peace.
You see, I have a lot of things that's on my mind, and I would like to let them out. Look, I see reality breaking down all my fantasies. It would be nice if I at least had one fantasy. That neutrality about to take a terabyte from the American apple pie, better get a slice. It's kinda scary the way that this life is moving on. Marvin's doing backflips inside his grave, what's going on? We have head-on collisions, not seeing another's vision. Maybe that's the reason why some colors fit the description. A lot of relationships need life rafts, sinking ships. I guess you just can't have only one like potato chips. I would love for you to listen with an open heart, but would you really even hear me if it's torn apart? I don't do the things that I used to. I'll be fine even if I lose you. Okay.
Peace and blessings, family. My name is asarimhotep, and I am with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology, as well as the popular YouTube channel Mbongi. I am an Africologist and computer scientist out of Houston, Texas, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I have spent the last 20 years researching the connections between ancient Kemet, that is modern Egypt, and modern Bantu-speaking cultures of Central and Southern Africa. Throughout this 20-year journey, I've examined all the relevant literature in numerous languages, collected paleontological as well as archaeological data from across millennia. I have presented hypotheses and abandoned hypotheses, come to conclusions and abandoned conclusions, reviewed arguments for and against known hypotheses, and analyzed frameworks that sought to define and characterize the vast array of African experiences. After over 20 years of asking critical questions of history, of philosophy, religion, and culture, I have finally gotten to the point where I have complete and total faith in the results of our research. I say our research because I am one of among a number of scholars who have either laid the foundations in classical Africology or are continuing to expand and develop more robust research on this connection between ancient Egyptian and Bantu civilizations. After spending so much time behind the computer and in the libraries and in the museums for over 20 years, I believe it is time to go out and to touch the living artifacts and engage with the people involved in the research whose stories we have been telling all this time, which brings us to why we are here today. Although I have written and will continue to write about the results of my research, my goal now is to summarize this data and present it in documentary film form. I have decided to put some of that computer science as well as new media experience together to creatively tell this important aspect of African history that many may not be aware of. The title of the film is China Into, Ancient Kemet and the Into Universe, and we are currently raising funds for the first phase of our journey. In February 2022, I will be joining the crew of the award-winning documentary film HAPI, The Role of Economics on the Development of Civilization, for a very important Returning to the Source tour and conference in Egypt, which we know is in Northeast Africa. And while I am there, I will be shooting parts of our film China Into and gathering footage for a proof of concept trailer, which will be used for greater fundraising efforts in the near future. And this is where you come in. I am currently trying to raise $5,000 to help with location expenses, equipment rentals, insurance, and the like, so that we can get some great shots for some primary as well as B-roll footage. When we return from Egypt, some of this footage will be combined with some preliminary interviews to compile a unique trailer to give the audience and potential investors a glimpse of the vision and potential of the film. Our ultimate goal is to travel to places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zimbabwe, Uganda, and South Africa for the first film. And did I forget to mention that we intend for this to be a series of documentary films? Therefore, subsequent films will require us to travel to places like Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal, as well as Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. We have big goals, and with your help, we can make this happen. And if you're interested in donating to this film project, please visit our website at www.chinaintofilm.com, where you can leave a donation. There are other ways you can donate as well, which includes joining our Patreon page, donating through CashApp, or donating live when we're doing a live show on YouTube. And the YouTube channel has over 6,000 subscribers, and Facebook has over 5,000 subscribers as well. And with a minimum donation of like $5 each, we can quickly reach our goal. You can spread the word of our efforts by sharing this video with friends and colleagues, as well as liking it. We appreciate your help, and all donors will be given credit on the website, as well as at the end of the film during the credits. We thank you from the bottom of our heart to those who have given generously already, and we look forward to bringing this important film to the public. Hotep.